Hello and welcome to your podcast, Glasses Off with Rosa. This is the show where you'll find reliable data to help you find solutions to common problems. I am your host, Rosa Antonini. Today, I am super excited to have Elizabeth Landau with me. She is a COO and co-founder of GreenPortfolio, a company that helps businesses and individuals make good financial choices for the planet. Elizabeth has over 10 years of leadership experience in B2B and B2C markets and startups with a focus on brand management, innovation, and go-to-market strategy. She earned a bachelor's degree in Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering from the University of Pennsylvania and has an M.B.A. from the NYU Stern School of Business. So, Elizabeth, welcome. I am so excited to share this platform with you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. And it's great to be here.
Elizabeth, I love your story and the vision and mission that you have of your company. Can you tell us what drove you to become so involved in bringing awareness about the pressing global warming issues that we are seeing today?
Sure. So, climate change has always been something of a personal interest of mine, but it had never really been anything I was working on professionally until 2022. And so, when the pandemic started, it really allowed me to reflect on my career. And I knew I wanted to work on something that matched my values. And so, I actually joined up with my co-founder, Bonnie Gurry, who had already started working on the idea for Green Portfolio. And she had always been working throughout her career in one way or another on fighting climate change. But one of the things that always bugged her was, in her day job, she'd be going off and trying to make a difference. But sometimes her savings or her 401k was off funding fossil fuels. And so something just didn't seem right about that to her. And she talked to me about that. And, it made a lot of sense to me too. And now there are a lot of stocks, funds, even checking and savings accounts that claim to be green and helping the world. But the problem is that not all of these products actually do what they claim. And they intentionally try to mislead you in their marketing efforts, which is called greenwashing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so, as somebody who believes in responsible marketing, it really angered me and I wanted to get involved. And so that's why I joined on as co-founder for Green Portfolio, because I believe that everybody should be afforded and allowed to see like a transparent assessment of like what their money's up to and is it funding climate solutions or fossil fuels.
One of the things I'm going to ask you about the leading causes of global warming, but there is one thing that sometimes I hear people saying, or almost like they don't care much because they see global warming either as something that is not really that real or that is something far away that is not going to affect them in their lifetime. Can you share with us why should everyone care about this and why should everyone try to get involved to stop it?
Sure, sure. So, you know, it's something that I think has been a little bit hard to feel, right?
Mhm.
Not everywhere in the country or in the world is as affected by extreme weather patterns or drought. It's something that we used to think, about was, linked just to like forest fires in California or whatnot. But, now, I live in New York City, from New Jersey, extreme weather patterns like are things that are happening more and more frequently and becoming more tangible, even around here. Like last year, flash flooding in the subways, more tornadoes and hail in New Jersey. Like these are just things that are now going to become more commonplace because of global warming and climate change. And even today, right? If we're talking, it's February. It's like 60 degrees outside.
Mhm.
And it hasn't snowed really meaningfully this year. And while I do enjoy a warmer temperature, it does kind of make me
Yes.
sad that we have not had snow. And
Mhm.
so these are just things that it's something that's always felt a little bit further off and further away, but is going to become more acute. And climate change does lead to financial risk. The US National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, so one of our like agencies here in the US, has estimated that economic damages from extreme weather events have been exceeding $100 billion annually.
Wow.
And so it's something that is here to stay, and it's something that we need to start thinking about how we as individuals can address it in,
Mhm.
an efficient way, and then also pressuring, companies and institutions to do the same.
And how can we do that? What are the main causes that are increasing the global warming?
Sure. So generally, global warming, it is happening because of, greenhouse gas emissions that get captured in the atmosphere. And,
So that is
greenhouse
basically when we are driving or when companies are using fuel to build their products. Is that what
yes.
you're referring to?
Yes. So yeah, the UN estimates that around 75% of global greenhouse gas emissions can be attributed to like the burning of fossil fuels. So
Mhm.
coal, oil, and gas.
So for regular individual like us, right, and the listener, how can we help? How can we get more involved? Sometimes people might be contributing willingly, but many times I think unwillingly. They really don't know how something affects global warming. So, what would be those red flags to keep an eye on and to, I don't know, check the daily activities that we're doing or even our investments to see if we are contributing to this issue, independent if we are aware of it or not.
Sure. So, yeah, it kind of also depends too on how many changes you want to make in your daily lifestyle, because some things are easier to do than others, and I totally recognize that. So there are things that you can do, and I'm not going to, these are in no specific order, but thinking about your car. So if you can switch to an electric vehicle and cut out fossil fuel and like gas entirely, that's useful. If it's something though that you can't do right now for one reason or another, financially or other reason, looking for cars with better fuel efficiency is also important, right? Because you can drive more
Okay.
miles and use less gas.
Mhm.
And then, other things that you can look at in your home. So, home electrification has become a very popular topic. Um, there's been a lot in the news recently around gas stoves and whether or not they are your leading contributor of like leakage in your house, because like the gas from the stove, there's leaks and whatnot. So you can always change out your gas stove for, an induction range. I realize that's, a very big shift in terms of how you would live your life. But you can also change from like a gas boiler to an electric heater for your home. Make sure that, your house is energy efficient. So LED light bulbs, making sure, your insulation is up to code. There's a lot of things you can do. And then there's also things you can do in terms of like, recycling or composting or, cutting out a bit of red meat. Now, you don't necessarily have to become fully vegan, but we do
Mm,
know that methane emissions, so it's usually from livestock, is also a leading contributor to greenhouse gas.
uh-huh.
Fossil fuel is the highest, but methane is also a large contributor as well, and that comes from cows mainly. So that's one area too. So these are all like daily lifestyle changes that you can make.
Yeah, I was thinking, Elizabeth, listening what you were saying, I was thinking like for some, maybe changing the boiler is an option, or maybe having proper, I don't know, insulation is an option. But it sounds like some of those things might take an effort, like a bigger effort, right? Like let's say people renting in places, well, they cannot do that, right? They don't have access to.
Right.
So it seems like there is like a bigger awareness that needs to happen, all type of business and industry. It's almost like if take that as a goal, like everyone to become a little greener for the health of the planet and everyone in it. So let me ask you something about companies and also some individuals. How can they take climate risk into account when thinking about fossil fuel versus renewable energy?
Yeah, so it's a really important question because we we talk a lot about how you can have like a positive impact, right? And I can talk more about that later with your finances. But there's also a risk involved, right? And climate risk, just to take a step back, like climate risk really refers to, any adverse effect that might happen, from climate change or global warming. And some of these risks are considered like a physical risk, and some of them are considered a risk from like transitioning from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And so I can give you like a couple of examples. So like a physical risk would be the physical impact of changing weather patterns. As global temperatures increase, so do, extreme weather events like wildfires and hurricanes and droughts. And so that's like one area you have to consider when you're, thinking about where your money is at in terms of like investments. And then
Mhm.
another part of it is this transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And so in that scenario, there are these things called like stranded assets. And so this could be, something that an asset becomes, devalued before the end of its productive life. And that could be in this example like equipment, that's used at fossil fuel companies. So let's say governments mandate the use of, low carbon or renewable energy, like functional fossil fuel infrastructure may become classified as a stranded asset and be devalued. And
Mhm.
so if you, look at your portfolio and you have a lot of, fossil like oil companies in your portfolio, over time, like that could become a risk if you believe as an individual that we will be moving to renewable energy and like those companies aren't making that change. And so that's just something that you need to consider. And so, some things that you can think about, as an individual, and these are just things to research. This is not specific financial advice for someone,
Mhm.
but you can switch to a, more sustainable retirement fund. The
Can you
recent
give some
administration.
examples?
Yeah, I can't give a specific fund, but the administration has started to approve the inclusion of ratings around environmental, social, and governance into the inclusion of retirement funds. So
Mhm.
that is something that can be looked at to see if there is more diversification from a sustainability perspective in your retirement fund. And then you as an individual could also like diversify your investment portfolio across lower carbon emissions related industries. So things like renewable energy or clean technology, sustainable transportation, or like alternative agriculture. It's important, obviously, always in your portfolio to still have diversification, right? So, but you could add different types of industries that aren't as exposed to like high levels of emitting like greenhouse gases. That could be something you could do to like look at from a climate risk perspective.
So for let's say regular people that they're not that much into stocks. They just
Mhm.
maybe get the company's doing with their money or retirement. I know that your company, which by the way, I think is a wonderful thing what it's doing. So congratulations. And the reason is because a lot of people take the global warming just pointing out problems, problems, problems. But in your case, it's trying to find a solution for it. So it's almost like, okay, this company might be doing all this, harming the planet with all this stuff that they are doing for global warming. But how can we do something to take the awareness into this other group of, let's say, company or products that are greener and just by default lead into that direction, which I think providing a solution instead of just concentrating to the problem.
Yeah, yeah, it's important, and there's like two philosophies of thought, I guess, on this is um in terms of like what you can do with your investments. So there's, either active divestment or pressure. And so they both have their own place, and it's really a personal preference on what you want to do. But
Mhm.
talking about divestment would be okay, well, if you start, extracting the money out of the problematic companies and
Mhm.
putting it into companies that, are doing better, there could eventually be a shift, right? Because if
Yes.
shareholders are not happy, they're leaving. Now, the counterpoint to that is, well, if they leave, someone else will just buy the shares and, the company won't care. And so the other thought is, well, put active pressure on, right? So be a very vocal shareholder, right? And keep those shares, but like make sure you are involved in like proxy voting and like making your voice heard. So
Mhm.
both are important. I guess what we believe at Green Portfolio is, it's hard sometimes as an individual to feel like your one voice counts. And so what
Yes.
we want to be
Mhm.
doing is as people sign up, to be part of our community, we'll be able to see how many of our customers are invested at certain companies and how many want to leave or do leave if something good or, if something bad happens from a climate perspective with that one company. And then we can really aggregate that individual action into collective pressure on those corporations, and
Mhm.
try to make the bad players do better by showing, like, financially, like, these people left. They are now no longer shareholders. They're probably no longer customers if you're also like a consumer facing company. And so that's important to be able to show. And no one's really doing that today. And there are studies. There's a study, I believe, out of Germany that did look at what happens if, there's pressure exerted on corporations, and like what happens to their emissions levels over time. And if a company isn't getting any pressure to, divest or change their behavior, I think on average theirs would go up annually 4 or 6%. I don't remember the
Oh,
specific number,
mhm,
but
mhm,
if there was pressure, they would actually decrease their emissions over the next, 4 to 5 years. So
mhm.
it does work if someone knows someone's watching.
Yes, at the end of the day, everyone has a product. You are either selling a service or you're selling a product, right? So if there are no buyers, then it doesn't matter, right? Doesn't matter how much shareholders and whatever happens. It needs people that are using that product. But I guess the other issue might be the cost, right? So far, I believe, and tell me if this is right, green alternatives could be, and they are usually more expensive than if we just get something that is using gas or something that is not green.
So I think it depends on the industry and the product, and I think it also depends on, like, what time horizon you're looking at, right? So, I don't think it's super cut and dry. I do know that from when I used to work, at a chemical company, over 10 years ago, we used to look at the cost of renewable energy
Mhm.
and what it would mean to actually have people transition to that and switch, and the costs were just, like, way too high. And now we're at the point where in some cases it can be at parity, to fossil fuel energy. So a lot's been changing pretty quickly in the past 10 years. And so it's just a matter of sector. There's also a problem too where I do think in some cases companies try to take advantage by labeling something green and charging more for
Mhm.
it to make more of a profit.
There is no way to prove that out, right? Right? Like if a company says something is green, is there a way to prove that it's not?
Yeah, I mean, what we do, so I mean, I focus more on the financial sector. So I'm looking more at like bank accounts or, funds or like, ETFs that are calling themselves green. So I'm looking at
Mhm.
things like that.
Okay.
On the consumer side of things, it's a little more complicated because you have to really dive into the whole supply chain and the value chain and see what their processes are. There are like companies out there and that do kind of audit that, but it's definitely a tough a tough business.
Yeah.
So what we do is we talked about a lot about gases. We look at CO2, so carbon dioxide emissions, at publicly traded companies level and also at banks.
Mhm.
Because banks lend their money out to projects, and some of those projects could be
I
fossil
see.
fuel projects or they could be clean energy projects. So we check what the bank is doing with the money that you have deposited. And then on the stocks side of things, we look at what companies are reporting. So we look at what they're disclosing in terms of their emissions. We look at their revenue. We have like a proprietary rating that we calculate based on a bunch of these different metrics that can indicate for is this company doing good for the climate or bad. And then we can look at what your whole portfolio is doing. So if you, give us access to just know like what you're invested in, we can tell you what percentage of your portfolio contains fossil fuels. What percentage of your portfolio has companies in it that have actually committed and have like a science-based target in order to reduce their emissions. There's lots of things we can show you there. And so we can show
Mhm.
you the winners and losers, like based on, what they're doing in terms of emissions, and then also provide you like suggested alternatives based on like that sector. We can give like a list of options that you can research
Okay.
and maybe change to.
Yeah.
What's really important, I think, to understand about this whole industry right now is it's constantly evolving and there's no standards. The one metric out there today that, for some people who've really dug into this and have tried to use is called an ESG rating. And ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. And
Okay.
these are just like different factors in those three categories that these ratings companies will use to decide like a company's long-term financial performance. So it's more about how the companies will win out against peers based on these factors, not what the company is actually doing to help environment or social impact. So like it can be a misleading rating for people if they think that what it's doing is looking at climate impact. Because as an example, like with oil companies, many of these oil companies have high environmental ratings, like, 80 out of 100 in an ESG rating, which,
Mhm.
when you think about it, doesn't make any sense because a company shouldn't have a high ESG score because of the environmental impacts that they have. It's bad. And so what happens is if they have a high score, can still end up in like a fund that is labeled ESG. And then you might have picked that as an individual because you thought it was doing good. And at the end of the day, you've invested in an oil company, which
Mm.
is not usually what people have wanted to do.
Mhm, mhm. Elizabeth, some people might think that I'm just one person. How can my money has an impact anywhere, right? I'm so small in comparison to all the companies and everything that's happening in the whole world. Can you tell us how much of an impact can an individual's finances really have on climate change?
Sure. It's we talked a little about the divestment pressure and how you can impact there.
Mhm.
And we do feel that based on the number of people we can have set up for our platform, based on like average number of investments, if we can actually, you know, take the individual action and really pressure from a collective effort through GreenPortfolio on companies, we're really on a mission to, decarbonize, $4 trillion in financial, retail financial assets. But
Okay.
but looking like more closely at like what you can do, right? Like there's an organization out of the UK, Make My Money Matter, that worked on some research, and this is for the UK market, but I think it's still fairly applicable here. They looked at if you took a pension fund in the UK and switched it from your traditional funds over to something that was considered more sustainable, what's the impact of that? And they found that doing that switch was 21 times more effective than a lot of like daily lifestyle activities combined.
Wow,
So,
that's impressive.
yeah. So, what we were talking about before, all those little switches or all those things
Mhm.
to think about 24/7, that can really weigh on you. But if you can take a little bit of time just to figure out, where you should be banking and how you should be investing, you can actually have a really big impact. And I think that that's really important for people to understand.
I was talking the other day with some of my friends, and I was mentioning about this company and how they try to find investment for green products. And none of them had an idea that that even existed. I mean, when I heard about your company for the first time, I thought it was great because I never heard of that concept before. So how can people, so let's say, I imagine your role is trying to help people find these investment products. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. What we try to do is meet people where they are. And so, our philosophy is, learn, plan, and act. And so if you're newer to this, you can learn through, information we have on our website, our blog posts to really understand a bit of what we've been talking about today, actually, how your money can make an impact, some smaller things you can do, some bigger things you can do, and what it all means. And then what we want you to do next is plan. And the big part of that is we have, some recommendations on our website today, but we're launching our Climate Hub platform, in April, around April, where you can, sign up and you'll be able to, see what your money is currently doing from a climate perspective. And then we can also then provide you with, lists of alternatives you might want to look into. It makes it a little bit easier for you to plan. And then, over time, once you've decided how you want to do this, we want you to act, and we want to be there to help you do that, whether divesting, from fossil fuels, or you want to be sending, emails to the CEOs of those companies to say you're unhappy, or, finding, more climate friendly investments. Like, we want to be there to help you with that. And that's what our platform will be able to help you do.
That is absolutely amazing. That's really good. And I'm actually really happy that you're offering that product. I'm grateful. And hopefully, in time, there will be more options with that mission in mind. So, Elizabeth, we are at the end of our show. Is there any final remarks that you would like to give to our listeners?
I would just say that, if the one thing you could do today is try to see what your money's up to, and also realize that, small changes, big changes, they all make a difference in the fight towards a more sustainable future.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you so much for listening. I hope this information was helpful. To learn more about Elizabeth and GreenPortfolio, please look at all the links and the website where you will find very useful information. Get involved is very easy. I know that we discussed a lot of terms here, but they really make this a lot easier for you. So take a look. And Elizabeth, best of luck to your company and hope to see great success.
Thanks,
Talk to you
Rosa.
soon.
Thanks for having me.
And this concludes our episode today. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope this information was helpful. If you like this type of content, please subscribe and share. Coming up, we will have more topics on mental health, weight loss, the issues with our education system, depression, global warming, and much more. Stay tuned. See you soon.